Hello and welcome back to Letter with ABC, a series on hand lettering. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about more advanced layouts and different techniques which you can use in order to create your layouts and make them look more dynamic. Now, if you want to keep learning more about it, make sure to watch until the end of this video to follow along the techniques.
So I'm starting off by creating some sort of draft or base. I usually use a rectangle for this. I find it easier for me to just plot along, like create a cross at the center and figure out where the words will go. So my quote is make yourself a priority, and with these 4 words, I am trying to figure out which one is more important, and that will base off of what size I'm going to be using for the layout. So here on the left, I am just trying my best to neatly put my words. This doesn't have to be perfect. This is really just the start of the process, and it's really important to just, work your way from there. So on the right, I am stylizing it a bit. I am adding script fonts, diagonal, making the words diagonal, and also, working on how each letter form cooperates in the layout. So here you'll see some sort of like work in progress version. If you notice, for scale, this thumbnail is just really small because what I like to do is I enhance it further when I work on the final piece. So it's easy to transform it in terms of the style, and after that you're going to want to plot out colors. For this, I'm going to use color pencil, and I decided to go for like a warmish tone, so you have like oranges, reds, yellows, and browns, and I think that would sort of like highlight certain areas. So here I am just enlarging the whole layout. What I like to do with the thumbnails is actually use it as a starting off point for the measurements. So as you can see here, I am deriving the same measurements. I'm just scaling it in a bigger canvas or a bigger sheet of paper. So this takes a lot of time, but it's really something that you have to take note of because it's the start of the process, and actually 80% of the creative process for lettering for me is really establishing the layout. The last part is basically this one where I start to color everything in. I would say that using colored pencils was quite a challenge, but I would highly suggest it if you are just starting out, because then the texture is similar to pencil, then it'll be easier for you to color along your letter forms and really experiment on different styles. So yeah, I'm using colored pencils. These aren't watercolor and they're not water soluble, so they're very pigmented, and you really have to put a lot of pressure to make it a bit more pigmented. I tried, I guess. So I'm just working out the different color schemes based on the colors that I presented earlier, and I am just basically filling out each area. So I treat it like a coloring sheet, if that makes sense. So, lining it with pencil, coloring it in with the color pencil, and basically that's how you create the whole artwork. So when this word finishes, you'd see that, okay, I'm done with the layout, but there are some areas that sort of need attention, and that's where I like to add my embellishments, because when you see it now, it looks kind of plain. So I use the different colors, look for empty spaces in between the layouts, and that's how I sort of build my collection of what designs to add. Usually I just put like little lines, dots, waves. I don't like to exaggerate much because these are supposed to be last minute additions compared to the actual word and quote and the whole layout. So you really just want to subtly add this and try to enhance it further. So now we're going to move on to the sheet that you have for your Letter with ABC workbook. So it's basically the same thing. What I've done is I made it easier for you to actually create the layout, since I already did traced over design. So in this case, I highly suggest also working with Analogous color scheme, which is similar to what I showed earlier, which are warm tones, and this one I'm using cool tones. The reason why you can start with this, it's basically, it's a no-frills strategy to get colors in without having to think much, and we always like how our eyes are going to please us in that sense. The problem with having too many colors in a layout is that it's going to be hard for you to figure out where your eyes will be paying attention to. And when we do lettering, as much as it's about, visual attention, it's also about reading and comprehension because these are words. So at the start, I really highly suggest working with just analogous colors like these, where you'd be able to pinpoint different colors that work well with each other. So, different aspects like how light the colors are, how dark it is. And in this case, using the word create, I am coloring in the inner parts or the empty spaces with a lighter color and then tracing it over with a dark one. So it's really a matter of knowing how you can properly assign each color and see how it stands out. You also don't want to use like one color several times in the layout because that way each word would have the same color, and I think there's not much of a dimension or character there. It just looks very plain. And it's through these that we can find a lot of different qualities that our letter forms can have, and also the character this quote plays out. If I used like a reddish tone, like reds and pinks, it would also give a different vibe. Blue is more of like, I like to associate blue with like making it a bit more calm. Red is very passionate. Yellow is very jolly and positive. So you can look up on these color theories also just to give an idea on what type of emotion you want to convey when you're doing your lettering pieces, or is there a certain color scheme that really appeals to you. One other way that I suggest you can look for color schemes is to go on Pinterest and you literally just type color palettes and you'll see a lot of different inspiration that you can draw ideas from. I would also say that if you're using colored pencil like me, I only have a limited set of colored pencils, so it's quite hard to figure out which colors I want to use. But if you're using paint, it's relatively easier because you have a variety of options and you can always mix your own colors, and that's the beauty of paint. Not that I don't like colored pencil, I do like it. It's a good practice actually. So here, instead of just leaving the word heart with just a sky blue, I'm adding these like lined shadows to sort of encapsulate what it looked like, and it complements also the word create on top, and that way it creates some sort of connection with the upper word, and that is always a good idea. This layout is actually quite harder because there are a lot of words. You will see that this quote, "You are a work in progress," there are a lot of letters and a few of them in each word. So for example, the word you it only has 3 letters, and then progress has 8 letters. So what you want to do with this kind of layout is really play around with the shapes and see which areas you can exaggerate and add more character and dimension to. So what I did was I made the Y a bit bigger, and so it sort of like framed the top part of the layout, and then I am just using a very bold orange. So I'm gonna use a complementary color scheme for this layout so you can see the difference. So complementary color schemes are basically colors that are relatively opposite each other on the color wheel. If you're not familiar with the color wheel, I highly suggest also doing a Google, and it will really help you in terms of visualizing your color schemes and getting to know how colors work with and against each other. So personally, I am a big fan of blue and orange, but if I don't want to use blue, since I just used blue in the previous layout, I go ahead and use green. I really like the combination of green and orange. I don't know why, it's always been something that I use in my personal collection. And then sometimes I throw in a bit of yellow or like yellowish orange or dandelion, so really adds a good amount of contrast, but not too empowering or not empowering, overpowering. And for me, my main concern usually when I do lettering is I don't want a certain word to be like a standout. It always has to work with the whole layout. It's not like someone is going to be like the lead actress and everyone else is going to be the supporting. They all have to work alongside each other in order to make it look great at the end. So with that, I just try to incorporate certain elements that I feel would strongly connect each word, since it's a very long quote and it's quite a complex layout. So for example, here I am just coloring in the word progress with a bright yellow. I honestly love this yellow. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trace over it with like an outline of green, just so it doesn't get too buried, because yellows are also quite crucial. It's not really the recommended color when you're coloring letter form, so you really need a darker shade to sort of outline the letter form when you're using a very light color like yellow, because yellow can look very bright and blinding in some way, and a lot of people don't really recognize yellow. I mean, it's very much common knowledge, like when you go to a bookstore, you wouldn't buy a yellow pen, but you'd get a yellow highlighter, so that is very much obvious. So I am also trying to put some shadows, but I admittedly have failed because I think I did not create this layout with the sole purpose of having shadows. So if you also will create a lot of exaggeration or shadows or outlines with your letter forms, make sure to add equal spacing. The best way that you can gauge the spacing is using a grid paper or dotted paper, just so you have a better eyeball on how they look like. And this is also why penciling it in is more important than the actual final work, because penciling it in sort of lays a groundwork for you to be able to monitor how it's going to look like and really derive your final work from there. So I'm just adding some browns also, because greens and browns work really well, colors of trees, and that sort of accompanies the warm tones of orange, so it's just a darker shade. So with that, I am just adding the embellishments and sealing this off with lighter colors, just so it's more cohesive. And yeah, basically this is what it looks like.
Thanks for watching this video, and make sure to download the Letterword ABC workbook to guide you on your hand lettering journey throughout the episodes. If you want to learn more about lettering, I actually wrote and illustrate a lot of books about it, so I will share it here. So first off, you have the ABCs of hand lettering. This is the basic guide you need to get started into hand lettering. You also have the lettering workbook, which is available in the Philippines, and I also have some available in the US. I will link it down below also for your reference. This is a self-published workbook. Apart from this, I also have this book called Hand Lettering A to Z, which is how you can create different font styles and different techniques with your hand lettering. This has been translated into 9 languages and is available worldwide, as well as the Hand Lettering A to Z workbook, which is an accompaniment to this book, and it's great to work with together. Lastly, if you'd like to get into more of hand lettering and calligraphy, I suggest picking up a copy of the Complete Photo Guide to Hand Lettering Calligraphy, also available worldwide, mostly in Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Book Depository, and all the respective links. I will make sure to put them down below for your reference. See you guys on the next video. Bye!